Chapter 11. A fire station never truly slept. The public imagined fire stations as places where crews sat around waiting for alarms. Anyone who had ever worked the job knew better. The building possessed its own rhythm, a constant pulse of maintenance, training, paperwork, inspections, planning meetings, equipment checks, and endless cups of coffee. At 0758 hours, the apparatus bay was already alive. Heavy 51 stood gleaming beneath the overhead lights. Rescue 51 occupied the next bay over, its side compartments open while firefighters completed final inspections. Beyond them stood the station's pride and responsibility, the two EF-72 fireframe assigned to the district. The towering machine looked almost alive in the early morning light. Its armored shell was open across the chest and shoulders, while diagnostic systems cycled through hundreds of checks. Soft blue status lights pulsed beneath exposed access panels. Jim Marshall stood halfway inside the machine with a scanner in one hand and a wrench in the other. "Whoever ran this thing yesterday owes me a bottle of whiskey." Sarah Walker looked up from her tablet. "The frame is operating within acceptable parameters." Jim snorted. "That's engineer talk for something is wrong, but not wrong enough to fix yet." Sarah's expression never changed. "I was a Marine before I became an engineer, which explains why nobody enjoys talking to you. Yet you continue to do so." The Marine exoframe tech allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. Nearby, a voice suddenly filled the bay. "Good morning, Station 51. The calm voice belonged to Atlas 51. Unlike most emergency management AIs, Atlas had become something more than software to the personnel of Station 51. The AI monitored dispatch traffic, coordinated resources, tracked equipment status, and managed thousands of pieces of information simultaneously. More importantly, Atlas had spent years working alongside the station's crews. The firefighters talked to Atlas. Atlas talked back. "Morning, Atlas," Jim replied. "I calculate a 73% probability you will complain about maintenance requirements before noon." Sarah looked up. "Only 73? I have allowed for the possibility that Mr. Marshall may still be asleep." Several firefighters laughed. Jim pointed a wrench toward the nearest ceiling camera. "Smart-ass computer." Comment noted. The station clock rolled over to 8 o'clock a.m. Instantly the building shifted gears. The bay doors rolled upward. Warning strobes flashed. Across the city, every station in Crown Emergency Services began morning status checks. Captain Arron Rourke stepped towards the communications console. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the easy confidence of someone who had spent decades making difficult decisions under impossible conditions. The radio crackled. "Station 51 commencing morning status update." Rourke pressed the transmit key. "Station 51, fully staffed and operational. Heavy 51, Rescue 51, Medic Unit 51, Fireframe Team operational and available for service." One by one, other stations checked in. The familiar ritual lasted only a few minutes, but it connected every firefighter, medic, and dispatcher across the city. When the final station reported in service, the morning officially began. "Coffee's on," firefighter Marcus Reed announced. That immediately drew more attention than the radio traffic. Marcus had spent 15 years with Crown Emergency Services. He was built like a linebacker and possessed the rare ability to look completely relaxed regardless of circumstances. Jose Alvarez followed him into the kitchen, carrying enough equipment to outfit a small army. Marcus eyed the overloaded utility belt. "Jose, one day your back is going to file a formal complaint. You never know what you'll need. You're carrying 3 flashlights." Jose shrugged. "What if 2 break? Then you'd still have one." "Exactly." The argument had apparently occurred many times before. Captain Rourke smiled as he passed them. Some traditions deserved preservation. An hour later, the station's conference room was filled. Today's topic wasn't fires, it was prevention. A 3-dimensional map hovered above the center table. Entire city blocks rotated slowly through the projection. Battalion Chief Eleanor Ward stood at the head of the room. The chief possessed the kind of authority that never required raising her voice. Years earlier, she had operated fireframes herself before moving into command. Everyone listened when Eleanor Ward spoke. The Liberation Front attack last month changed several planning assumptions. The room grew quiet. Nobody needed clarification. The attack had nearly cost lives across multiple districts. Ward manipulated the display. Several structures highlighted in amber. These buildings have been identified as high-risk targets due to population density and symbolic value. The image shifted again. Hospitals, transit hubs, government facilities, emergency service stations, including Station 51. Ben Harper frowned. They're actually considering hitting fire stations. Ward nodded. Any organization trying to destabilize society eventually targets emergency response. Nobody liked hearing it. Everyone understood it. The discussion continued for nearly an hour. Response times, mutual aid protocols, evacuation corridors, fireframe deployment strategies. It wasn't exciting work. It was the work that kept people alive. After the meeting, Rourke returned to his office. A notification waited on his desk display. Home link available. His expression softened. He accepted the call. Kate Rourke appeared immediately. The years had added lines around her eyes, but they had never diminished her strength. "You're actually sitting down," she said. "Don't get used to it." Behind her, 14-year-old Emily was attempting to help 10-year-old Lily with schoolwork. The effort appeared unsuccessful. Connor entered the room a moment later, 17 years old, tall, already broad-shouldered, already carrying himself more like an adult than a teenager. Rourke noticed immediately. Fathers always did. "How's school?" Connor shrugged. "Fine." The universal answer of teenagers throughout recorded history. Kate rolled her eyes. He spent half the evening watching fireframe videos. Connor immediately protested. "They're training documentaries. They're fireframe videos. They're educational." Emily laughed. Lily laughed. Even Rourke smiled. Connor looked betrayed. Kate folded her arms. "You are not helping." "Nope." Connor looked toward his father. "You ever think they'll let civilians tour a fireframe facility?" Kate answered before Rourke could. "No." The room erupted with laughter. Connor groaned. Rourke watched the exchange quietly. Moments like these mattered. In his line of work, there was never any guarantee how many you would get. A tone sounded from his station console. Priority traffic. The smile faded. Duty reclaimed its place. "I've got to go." Kate nodded. She understood. She always had. "Be careful." "I'll do my best." The connection ended. For a moment, Rourke stared at the now dark screen. Then he stood and returned to work. Outside his office, Station 51 continued moving forward. Calls waiting, equipment needing service, citizens needing help, the endless cycle of emergency response. None of them knew that before the day was over, Weston Howard would arrive carrying news that would reach far beyond the walls of Station 51 and far beyond the city itself. The first call of the day came at 10:43 hours. The alert tones sounded throughout Station 51. Engine 51, Rescue 51, Medic 51. Respond to reported structural collapse. Construction site. Multiple injuries possible. Every firefighter in the station was moving before the dispatcher finished speaking. Coffee cups were abandoned. Conversations stopped. Training materials disappeared. The easy rhythm of station life transformed instantly into focused efficiency. Captain Arron Rourke was already climbing into Heavy 51. "Let's move!" The construction site occupied 3 city blocks on the edge of a growing commercial district. Half-finished towers rose above the skyline like skeletal giants. The collapse itself wasn't catastrophic. A support section had failed during installation, sending several tons of steel and composite decking crashing onto a lower work platform. By the time they arrived, workers were already pointing towards the damaged section. Rourke surveyed the scene. "Marcus, establish command. Copy. Jose, with me. On it. Ben, secondary search. Got it." Rachel Morgan and her medic crew were already unloading equipment. The veteran paramedic barely glanced up. "Please tell me nobody's dead." Rourke looked towards the damaged platform. "Working on it." "That's not a no." "No, it isn't." Rachel sighed. "Figures." For the next 40 minutes, Station 51 did what it always did. They solved problems, not with speeches, not with heroics, with training, with teamwork, with experience. Jose Alvarez crawled through twisted support beams to reach an injured worker trapped beneath a collapsed section. Marcus Reed coordinated heavy rescue operations while simultaneously keeping younger firefighters focused. Ben Harper located 2 injured workers who had become separated during the collapse. Rachel Morgan treated everything from broken bones to panic attacks. When it was over, every worker went home alive. For CES, that was counted as success. Back at the station, the atmosphere relaxed again. Gear was cleaned, reports were filed, lunch appeared. An argument over what was for dinner and whose turn it was to cook took 15 minutes. Nobody could quite explain how firehouses managed to produce food so quickly after an incident. It was simply one of life's mysteries. In Bay 3, Jim Marshall and Sarah Walker continued work on the EF-72. The towering fireframe dominated the space. Fresh diagnostic displays floated around its armoured form. Atlas 51 monitored the process through dozens of sensors. "Thermal regulator status?" Sarah asked. "Operating within normal tolerances," Atlas replied. Odin's voice followed a moment later from a nearby terminal. "Projected efficiency loss of 3.7% within 72 operational hours." Jim pointed toward the screen. "See, Odin agrees with me. I merely presented data. You took my side. I did not. You absolutely did." A pause, then Atlas spoke. "I believe this conversation demonstrates why artificial intelligences should not be included in workplace disputes." Several nearby firefighters laughed. Even Sarah smiled. Odin remained silent for a moment. Observation noted. The afternoon had settled into a comfortable rhythm when the station doors opened. Conversations slowed, not stopped, just slowed, because everyone recognized the man who entered. The conversation in the bay slowed as a familiar figure stepped through the station doors, Lieutenant Weston Howard. Most of the department knew him well enough that the rank barely mattered anymore. Royal Marine, combat veteran, pilot of the assault frame temporarily housed in the Exo Bay, friend of Station 51. Weston wasn't wearing a dress uniform. Nobody would have believed it if he had. Instead, he wore his usual field fatigues, sleeves rolled up, and boots showing actual wear instead of parade ground polish. The uniform looked lived in. Firefighters respected that. They could always spot the difference between someone who worked for a living and someone who only posed for photographs. Marcus spotted him first. "Well, there goes the quiet afternoon." Several heads turned. Jose laughed. "He's not even through the door yet." "I'm telling you," Marcus said, pointing toward Weston. "Every single time Weston shows up, somebody's day gets complicated." "Pretty sure that's because you follow him around asking questions." "That's beside the point." Weston heard the last part as he walked by. "I heard that." "Good," Marcus replied. "Means my hearing still works." A few firefighters chuckled. Weston shook his head and continued toward the command office. Captain Arron Rourke was standing near the operations display when he arrived. "Weston." "Captain." The two men shook hands. "No surprise inspections today?" Rourke asked. Weston laughed. "If I ever start doing inspections, you've got permission to throw me out." "Good. Saves me the paperwork." The two men shared a grin. "How's everyone doing?" Weston asked. "Nobody's on fire. That's usually a good sign." "Fair point." Rourke studied him for a moment. Weston looked relaxed, but after spending enough time around Station 51, Rourke had learned to read him. "You need something." "I'm looking for Richard." That immediately got Rourke's attention. "Personal favor or official business?" Weston considered that for a second. "Let's call it somewhere in the middle." "That's the answer I was afraid of." Weston smiled. "Fair." Rourke sighed. "I'll tell him to pack a bag." Probably not a bad idea. Emergency corridors cut through the urban landscape. Far below, Station 51 shrank into the distance. Richard finally broke the silence. "Where are we going?" "The palace." That got his attention. "You know, most people get nervous when someone says that." Weston folded his arms. "Most people aren't you." The Royal Palace Command Complex occupied an entire district. Layers of security surrounded the facility. Military personnel moved with quiet efficiency. Nothing looked rushed, which somehow made the place more intimidating. Inside, Weston led Richard into a command center unlike anything he had seen before. A massive holographic display filled the room. The city floated in mid-air. So did regions beyond it. Transportation routes, communication networks, military deployments, emergency response assets. Everything. Richard stared. "That's a lot of information." A Royal Marine officer nearby glanced over. "You're only seeing 20%. Richard decided he didn't want to know what the other 80% looked like. The briefing began moments later. An intelligence officer addressed the room. "The Liberation Front leadership has been positively identified." The display changed. Several structures appeared, remote, hidden, protected. Or at least they had been. "Regional commanders cut off. Communications destroyed. Logistics networks collapsed. Entire sections of the organization ceased functioning. Beside him, Weston remained motionless, not celebrating, not smiling, simply watching. The same way a firefighter watched a controlled burn. Necessary, dangerous, effective, nothing more. After several minutes, the final reports began arriving. The operation was over. A summary appeared above the table. Liberation Front senior leadership neutralized. Regional command structure disrupted. Communications infrastructure destroyed. Operational capability severely degraded. The organization still existed, but it would never be the same. Prince Alistair studied the report in silence. Lucy and Carter was already reviewing follow-up operations. Neither man looked victorious, only focused, because both knew the same thing. One operation could end a battle. Ending a war was harder. Weston finally looked toward Richard. The news feeds will call this a major victory. Richard nodded. And what do you call it? Weston considered the question. His eyes remained fixed on the fading tactical display. Preparation. Richard raised an eyebrow. Weston shrugged. People think victories happen when the shooting starts. His gaze shifted briefly toward Prince Alistair, Lucy and Carter, and the glowing symbol of crown above the table. Most victories happen months before that. Hours later, Richard stepped back into the familiar apparatus bay of Station 51. The station looked exactly the same. Marcus Reed was arguing with a coffee machine. Jose Alvarez was carrying far more equipment than any sane person should. Rachel Morgan was finishing reports. Jim Marshall was complaining about maintenance. Sarah Walker was pretending not to enjoy it. Atlas 51 monitored the station from the background. Elsewhere, Odin quietly exchanged technical diagnostics with the station AI. Normal, comfortably normal. Richard stood silently for a moment. Across the kingdom, the balance of power had shifted. The Liberation Front had suffered the greatest defeat in its history. The consequences would echo for months, maybe years. But here at Station 51, the mission remained unchanged. Answer the call, protect the public, save lives. Tomorrow the alarms would sound again, and when they did, Station 51 would be ready, as it always was. Before we go, I'd like to give a special shout-out to the men and women of the St. Andrews Public Service District Fire Department in Charleston County, South Carolina. Founded in 1949 as part of the St. Andrews Public Service District, the department has served its community for more than 75 years, providing fire protection and emergency response services to generations of residents. The department continues to evolve to meet the needs of a growing community, including the opening of a new fire station #3 facility in 2026. While Crown Emergency Services is a work of fiction, the dedication, professionalism, and service shown by real firefighters every day helped inspire many of the stories told here. To the firefighters, officers, and support personnel of St. Andrews Fire Department, thank you for your service and thank you for everything you do for your community. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next chapter of Crown Emergency Services.